Church. We're so excited that you're here worshiping with us today. If you're a first-time guest, welcome home. We're ready to serve you. If you have any questions, our amazing team at the Connect Center in your campus foyer is ready to help. You can also fill out a connection card located in the seat pocket in front of you. For filling this out, we'll send you a thank you with a Wawa gift card inside. If you're interested in serving on the Dream Team, fill out an orange Get in the Game card or sign up for Growth Track that happens every weekend at both campuses. There are Connect kiosks located in the worship center and in the middle of the foyer that you can use for your connection card or tithes and offerings.
Hey church, a new semester of Connect groups are beginning again this fall. If you're interested in leading a Connect group, please make sure to attend our Connect Group Leader Meeting taking place July 30th at the 11:15 service at Summers Point and the 10:30 service at Mays Landing.
You say come, taste and see, Lord, we come running to your heart, brave and free, Lord, we come every victory I was made for, love unending, I was made for.
Enjoy the rest of your service and welcome home.
Hey church, what a powerful weekend it's already been. Listen, Pastor Tom is bringing another word for the month of July. What a privilege to have him a part of our team. Come on, Mays Landing, give a shout out for Pastor Tom. He's an incredible campus pastor over at Mays Landing. I love the passion and the dedication he has. You know, one thing I love about Pastor Tom is he is a pioneer, and then he's got an accent like me. So yeah, the joke sometimes is do you have to hire someone with an accent at the church? No, but man, Pastor Tom and I, we love to drink some tea because we both come from the Queen. But at the end of the day, his devotion to God, his pioneering attitude is absolutely phenomenal. The way he leads in so many different departments at this church truly blows my mind away. What a privilege to have him a part of the team. So come on, lean forward. Mays Landing, come on, shout your campus pastor down, encourage him via the screen. Summers Point, lean in a little bit, and let's dig into that fresh, hot, on fire word that God has through Pastor Tom for each of us today. Love you guys.
How are we doing? Everyone feeling good? Everyone enjoying the weather? Not much, not a little bit? Well, hey, come on, why don't we go ahead? Let's welcome Mays Landing, anyone watching online. Glad you're able to spend this part of your weekend with us. And we're going to be continuing today talking about Made For. We're going to be continuing Made For. How many of you love the single? How many of you have checked it out already? Man, it sounds good. We started, the launch was last weekend, and to accompany the launch of Made For, our first ever single release coming out of Fusion Church, we had our very own worship director, Blake Austin, bringing the word. Come on, how good was that? You know, some of the feedback we had last week about Blake's message was that perhaps he should do the speaking, and Pastor Brendan and even myself should take a bit more of a worship role. I'm like, dude, that sounds easy, you know. Every victory. Come on, somebody. I was made for. I could just keep going. Love unending. All right, we'll leave Blake to do that. But it was a great message, and so if you haven't had a chance to check it out, I highly encourage you to jump online and check that. And some great news. Pastor Brendan, Danielle are going to be back in the house next weekend, and so it's going to be great to have them home. I know that they've been getting away, getting refreshed, and I'm sure they've had a great time. I haven't had a ton of communication with the boss because he's been, just focusing on family, right priorities, am I right? And so he's been focusing on family, recharging the batteries, but I'm 100% positive he's going to be back here next weekend with a hot, fiery word. So this is the only place you want to be next weekend is at Fusion Church because Pastor Brendan's going to be back and he's going to have a fire message. But I'm excited to be able to speak with you this weekend, and I don't take this for granted. This is not an opportunity that's been given to me that I take lightheartedly. I'm privileged to be able to be here. And so thank you so much for joining us. I'm so pleased you're here. If this is your first time, check out one of our Connect cards. Take a few moments and fill that out and let us know how you're doing. Let us know how we can help you, be a blessing to you. And they can go in the Connect kiosk at both campuses after service. But do we have anyone in here and you love movies? Really, this is America, right? We love movies. Movies. Well, I got to have one of my movie ambitions come true when my wife was 8 months pregnant with our son, who's now 5 years old. But we were living in New York City at the time, and we decided that we were going to take sort of a week away, have a quiet weekend. And so where we decided to have a quiet weekend was Philadelphia. And that may sound stupid, but when you live in New York City, Philadelphia is a quiet week. It is what it is. So we decided to go to Philadelphia, and, my wife wanted to do the historical stuff, so we saw the Liberty Bell, we saw all the historical stuff, but I only wanted to go one place, and that's the Rocky Steps. That's all I want. All I wanted to do was go to the Rocky Steps. And so we went. I'm not even ashamed. I'm not even embarrassed. I ran up those things and I jumped up and down. I'm not even embarrassed. I don't care. But and you may be wondering, did my wife, who was 8 months pregnant, run up the steps and jump around too? You bet she did. She's tough. She's from Alaska. They don't mess around up there. But but one thing you may not know about me, I don't know if I've ever shared this in church before, but I'm mad into movies. And when I was a teenager, my ambition was to be a film director. That was my goal in life, even to the point that I went to community college to study film theory. And when I studied film theory, one of the things they told us is that if you boil it down, if you look at it, there are really only 7 stories that exist in modern storytelling. In modern storytelling techniques, think Hollywood, think novels that come out today, think anything where there's a narrative, any story. There's basically 7 stories that exist. I'm not going to go into details on all of them, but within those 7 stories, there's what they call a meta plot. And the meta plot is the framework that all these 7 stories hang on. And what they have is these 7 stories, they all hang on this meta plot, is what the technical term they call it. And this just a few characteristics, a few frameworks that all stories hang on. And one of them is the sense of adversary, is a sense of, there needs to be some overcoming. There needs to be some challenge that seems impossible that needs to be overcome. And Rocky, God bless that bro, but Rocky is the perfect example of this in Hollywood. Because if the movie was, well, Rocky is the champion, the best boxer in the world, and then some guy who's not even really a professional boxer wants to fight him, and so they fight, and Rocky knocks him out in the first round. That's not a movie. That's not a movie. What makes it a movie is there being an adversary. What makes it a movie is there being a challenge, is that at some point you sort of question to yourself, man, is this going to be impossible? And think that's any movie of any kind, whether it's a romantic comedy, there's no way he's going to repair the broken relationship with the girl. Exactly the same thing. The only exception to this in the 7 is tragedy. All different movie plots, they have it, but tragedy. But even tragedy, there's this inference of, if only he would have done it right, he would have overcome the impossible. All movie plots, it's all about how can somebody overcome something? How can somebody that when life gets them down, when circumstances get them down, the movies, the novels, everything on TV, it's all about how can they get back up? That's every movie, that's every storyline that's out there. It's all about how can we get back up. The only exception to this is a tragedy. There are 6 other categories, but the only exception to this is a tragedy. And it serves as a cautionary tale of, this is what happens when you do things wrong and you don't get back up. And yet so many of us, we can look at movies and we can even look at the lives of other people, and we can admire the quality in others of getting back up. We can look at whether it's a movie or whether it's somebody we know, somebody that's going through life. When somebody gets up against all the odds and gets back on their feet and overcomes an adversary, that's something in others we respect. But when it's us, we realize it's a lot easier to admire it in other people than to live it out ourselves. It's a lot easier to admire that in other people than it is to walk that through ourselves. So we would say this about someone's faith. When someone professes Christ, when someone says that they're a believer, and then a great challenge comes, something terrible happens, something happens in life that frankly just is not fair, something that should not happen, something that is not right. But when it happens, they cling on even closer to God, and they come through the other side. That's the kind of faith in others we admire. But when it's us, man, it's easier to be the admirer than it is someone in the middle of it. I wanted to check out a psalm today. And this psalm is, if I was going to say, this is possibly my favorite psalm. Psalm 113, and we're going to start in verse 5. Who can be compared with the Lord our God, who is enthroned on high? He stoops down to look down on heaven and on earth. He lifts the poor from the dust and the needy from the garbage dump. He sets them among princes, even the princes of his own people. And this starts with a rhetorical question. Who is like the Lord our God? Who can we compare God to? It's a rhetorical question. It's a way of the psalmist saying, this is something about God you need to know, and no one else is like this. This is a characteristic of God, that he sits on high, but he comes down and he lifts the needy from the dust and from the garbage dump. It doesn't matter how low someone's got. God's desire is to come down and lift us up. That's the desire of God. And if you're taking notes today, I'd ask you just to jot down this first thought, and it's the title of today's message. Made for getting back up. Made for getting back up. I heard a great quote from there's a preacher in Miami who I love to listen to. He pastors a fantastic church in Miami, Florida. And the preacher, Rich Wilkerson, he said, Christians are never down. They're either up or getting up. It's good, right? Come on, that's worth a round of applause right there. I mean, that's good. Christians are never down. They're either up or getting up. And a way that someone shared with me that I found to be helpful is to think of it in terms of mountains and valleys. And this is a biblical theme. As you look through the Bible, you'll see this theme of mountaintops. And then also those valley experiences. I walked through the valley of the shadow of death. No Coolio fans here? Never mind. But think of it in terms of mountaintops and valleys. And one thing I've learned, sometimes the hard way, is that it's better to establish and determine your faith and your convictions on the mountaintop rather than the valley. And oftentimes it's because if you think very literally, and this is a military terminology, by the way, but on the mountaintop you have a clear perspective. On the mountaintop you can see for miles. On a mountaintop, if a fight comes, if an adversary comes, you're in a preferred position. You've got the vantage point. Compared to the valley, whereas if the fight comes, you've got an uphill battle, literally. And in the valley, all you can see is valley. When we're in crisis, when life is falling apart around us, when things are tough, when we're in a down season, all we can see is valley. That's not the moment to set your convictions. Those aren't the moments to shape the kind of faith that you want to have, the kind of faith you need to have. No, it's the mountaintop. And if you're here today, I'm not going to embarrass anybody, but if you would say the season of life that you're in is that valley experience, I don't even need to give examples. You know exactly what I'm talking about. If you are in a valley experience right now, my encouragement to you is hang on. And if you're on a mountaintop, if life's going well, if things are good, you're seeing God's blessing, you're seeing his hand on your life, you're seeing God move, you're seeing prayers answered, I would challenge you, this is the time to set your convictions. This is the time to decide, this is the kind of faith I am going to have. This is the kind of belief in Jesus. This is the kind of life. This is the kind of person. This is the kind of character I am going to have. If life is on the up, if you're on that mountaintop with a clear perspective, this is the time that you decide no matter what comes against me, no matter what might try and take me down, no matter what it is that might try and rob me of God's best, I'm sticking firm. I will not be moved. I will not be shaken. No. My roots are down deep. My faith is set on him. And I would encourage you, decide before you have to decide. Decide before you have to decide. Don't wait until you're in the middle of the crisis to try and weigh up what part your faith is going to play. But beforehand, when life is going well, when things are coming together, when the stress is off you, that's the time that you decide and you say to your spouse, no matter what, this is how we're going to get through anything is by grabbing onto God and not letting go no matter what comes against us. Decide before you have to decide. Decide before you have to decide. What kind of character are you going to have? What kind of faith are you going to have? When life's falling apart, when you're in those down seasons, as we read in the Psalm, if you're in the dust and you're in the garbage dump, when you just feel like everything else is falling apart, if you've already decided, then you're not down, you're getting up. You're not down. You are not knocked out. You are getting up. And there's a passage back in Genesis 32. And Jacob, who's one of the great patriarchal heroes of the Old Testament, Jacob one night was wrestling with a man, and he possibly didn't even realize at the time, but he was wrestling with God himself. And as he's wrestling with God, to get his attention, smacked Jacob on the hip. And Jacob he was a tough character, but God knew that, man, if I can just get this guy, I can really do something great with his life. And to get his attention, God hit him on the hip. And it goes on to say that Jacob got up and walked, and he walked with a limp for the rest of his life. He walked with a limp. You know, some things will get us down in life, and it would be easier to roll over and play dead. A part of getting up is sometimes you need to walk with a limp. There are some things that happen to you. They're serious stuff. It's intense stuff. It's life-altering stuff. But let me encourage you, if you get nothing else out of today, but you resolve in your heart, you decide, if you're on a mountaintop, you decide, this is the kind of character I'm going to be, this is the kind of faith I'm going to have, then no matter what might knock me down, I'm getting up, even if I have to walk with a limp. Because it's oh so easy. It's so easy to roll over and play dead and give up and throw in the towel. And there are some situations where people would look and they would, I can't even blame you. I can't even be surprised that that's the decision you made. Let's walk with a limp. Let's walk with a limp. In those tough seasons, it's time to get up. Let God lift you out of the dust and sit you among the princes of his people so you can walk with a limp. Amen. Another thing I wanted to remind you of is seasons don't last forever. Seasons do not last forever. And I think if we sort of thought about even sort of right now, we're in the middle of summer. Beautiful weather most of the time. Beautiful weather. But we know that 6 months from now, it's going to look very different. But at the same time, we would never look out when the snow's falling in February and say, you know what, come July, this may still be around. When it comes to weather, we understand this. And I actually found these images, if the media team's ready to just sort of let you see these. But I found these. This is a park in Austria. And this park in Austria is at the foothills of some mountains. And so this is just a park, but the water level rises on the lake. And so they're currently underwater because when the springtime comes and the water runs down the mountain, it lifts the level of the lake. But these guys get and understand that seasons do not last forever. In fact, we're going to prepare for a different season. Even though another season will come, we're going to be ready for when another season rolls around. You see, just look. You never thought you'd see a scuba diver on a park bench. But these guys get seasons. They understand that how it looks right now will not be how it will always be. Right now, whatever it is that you're up against, it might be causing you so much pain and so much anguish. It may be so devastating to you that it feels that this is the rest of your life. Let me tell you, if you resolve deep in your heart, no, I'm going to get up and I'm going to walk with a limp, you will walk, and you will walk in the promises of God. And you will walk in the calling he has for you. Can we all say walk with a limp? Grab the person next to you and just start shaking their shoulder aggressively. Walk with a limp. Here's another thought. I'd ask you to jot this down. Or even on the Fusion app, if you're taking notes on there. You can be patient and expectant at the same time. You can be patient and expectant at the same time. So I think when life comes, when a season hits, We can understand, well, I should be patient. God's timing is perfect. Yeah, of course. We know that. That's a given. But I don't think it's wrong to be expectant at the same time. Lord, this is the last doctor's appointment I'm going to have to go to. Lord, this is the last bad report I'm going to get. Lord, this is the month where my finances turn around. You may understand needing to be patient to get out of this season, but that does not mean you have to stop being expectant and believing that God is going to bring a breakthrough. Yes, there's patience, of course. We used to have a joke in Bible college. Praying for patience is the only prayer that God is guaranteed to answer right away. Because as soon as you do, you get a chance to exercise it. We understand the need for patience. You may be waking up, going through grief right now. You may understand that over time, this wound is going to heal. That over time, you'll be able to get up and walk with a limp. That doesn't mean you don't believe for God for emotional healing today. That doesn't mean you stop believing, Lord, I believe that I'm going to get a fresh dose of hope today. You can be patient and expectant at the same time. And one thing I wanted to pull from this scripture, the Psalm, is that it doesn't specify why the needy were in the dust. It doesn't specify why the person was in the garbage dump. And I've done numerous work with homeless outreach centers. It's been some phenomenal work. I mean, I've gone and volunteered for the day, but been absolutely amazed at the incredible work some of these outreach centers do. And one thing that amazes me is that once you start to talk to folks that are homeless, folks that need that kind of help, folks that need to get back up again from that kind of situation, is if you listen, you take the time, they've all got a story. They've all got a story of how they ended up here. You know what amazes me is that the folks running these organizations never say, you can't come in here unless your story checks out. We're not going to help lift you up unless your story checks out. Or you got drug addiction problems? No. We're only going to lift up these kind of people. Oh, hold on. You got criminal records? No. You stay out there. No. These organizations, folks that work with outreach, they will let anybody in. And I want to tell you, I do not care why you're down. I do not care the cause of your valley season. I do not care the reason that you are down, because God is not going to discriminate lifting you up, because it is simply who it is. Who can be compared to the Lord our God, who lifts the needy from the dust? Doesn't matter why they're there, how they got there. God is in the business of lifting people up. If it's your fault, so be it. God's lifting up. If it's someone else's fault, so be it. God's lifting you up. If something happened to you that never ever should have happened, if you inherited something terrible and awful, God is going to lift you up. It does not matter the reason or the cause why you found yourself down. It doesn't change that you were made for getting back up, because who is like the Lord our God, who lifts the needy from the dust, those from the garbage heap, and sits them among the princes of his people. And this is possibly the biggest reason we stay down, is when we blame ourselves for why we're in this down season. That doesn't stop God wanting to lift you up. Whether it's your fault or not, whether there's someone else to blame, that does not stop God wanting to lift you up. I wrote this down, and it was helpful for me, and hopefully it's helpful for you, is it doesn't matter why you're down when you know who can lift you up. It doesn't matter why you're down when you know who can lift you up. And there's a very famous passage from the Bible, from John's Gospel, I'd love to share with you. As John 8. Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives, but early the next morning he was back again at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? They were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him. But Jesus stooped down. We've read that word before tonight. Stoop. Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, "All right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Did even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more." I wanted to share this verse with you, this passage of scripture, because that last phrase that Jesus said, "Go and sin no more," I think if Jesus just went around saying that, "Go and sin no more," you over there, stop that, go and sin no more, I think we would find Jesus to be an abrasive person. If the message of the church was "Go and sin no more," I think the church seems abrasive. But if we look at the whole picture of the story, a woman was thrown. A lot of historians, a lot of church historians believe that this woman would have been naked at the time, thrown at the feet of Jesus, used to try and trick Jesus into saying something that they could hold against him. What do you say about this woman and the terrible stuff she's done? And Jesus, of course, reminds them that everybody needs grace. Everyone needs forgiveness. And after he's let this woman know that I'm not here to condemn you, then he says to her, "Go and sin no more." And I think that message of "go and sin no more," if we hear that and we read that and we just assume that it means go and behave yourself, stop doing bad things, I think we miss the heart of this story. I think the heart of this story is more to do with, if you keep doing what you've been doing, it's only a matter of time until you're right back here again. You living your life the way you've lived it has got you here. Today, I'm here. I'm able to give you a break. I'm able to give you another chance. What about next time? When we're down, when we're going through a down season, let's learn the lessons that God wants us to learn. As he comes in, he sort of says, like, "Hey, you may be here because something you did. Doesn't mean you're out of the game. It doesn't mean this is the final chapter for you. I'm here to lift you up. I'm here because you are made for getting back up. But come on, I love you too much to let you keep doing the same stuff that got you here in the first place." And the way I phrased it in my notes is, life will give you plenty of down seasons. Don't create extras. Life will give you plenty of down seasons. Let's not create extras. But instead, if we have this life where when we're on a mountaintop, we establish a firm faith. You know what? No matter what, Lord, I am with you. Lord, when trials come, Lord, when tough seasons come, I'm with you. Lord, when life seems impossible, when life seems unfair, I'm going to stick with you. On the mountaintop, I've got a clear perspective. I'm not fighting on every corner. I'm not fighting on two fronts. I'm not surrounded by valley, but with a clear perspective, I'm with you, Lord. As you go through, patient that God is going to make a way, that this season will not last forever. But with all the patience in the world, man, I'm going to expect breakthrough any second now. Never forgetting that God doesn't care if it was your fault, someone else's fault, or just plain life being unfair that got you in that bad season. He is in the business of lifting people up because you were made for getting back up. Now, a couple of thoughts for you, a couple of questions. I'd ask you just to jot these down and hopefully find some time this week to pray about these, to ask yourself how this may apply to you. Well, the first thing is, what would being lifted up look like for you? What would being lifted up look like for you? You know, the psalm towards the end of the passage we read, it talks about sitting people among the princes of his people. He lifts the needy from the dust, those from the garbage dump, and sits them among the princes of his people. God, when he lifts up and he places you in places you do not deserve to be, receiving a blessing you could never ever earn, that is God lifting you up. What does that look like for you? What is that situation? What is that circumstance that you need to be lifted up out of and placed among the princes of his people in the place you could never ever get to on your own, with blessings you could never ever earn? And the second question, have you become content with being down? You know, Jacob, when he got his hip knocked out of whack, it would have been way easier for him to sit down and stay down, but he walked with a limp. Have you committed to walk with a limp? Or has it become way too easy to lay down? I feel it's important that I say this. I don't stand up here today from this position of strength. I'm up here today with shared weakness. I'm not exempt from life. If I was you, if I'd come to church, I listened to a message like this, I'd be tempted to sit there and say, yeah, well, it's easy for you to say. I've had my fair share of phone calls from doctors I don't want. I've been at the funerals of people that had so much more to live for. I've sat in doctors' offices and had to comfort my wife who was devastated. I've had doctors' reports we did not want to get. I've been fired from a job when my wife was pregnant, twice. And I don't say this stuff, and I'm not going into details because I don't want this to be about us comparing whose sad story is the worst. I say it simply that you trust me and believe me that we're in this together. This is not about my position of strength. This is about shared weakness. But I can say that I haven't been a Christian for coming on 14 years now. If you commit, I'm walking with a limp no matter what. I'm in this thing. God, we doing this. God, I'm not letting go. He is faithful. Seasons do not last forever, and he does pull you out at the other side. And final thought, I'm going to be super quick, and you guys can stand as we get ready to get back into worship. But in John's gospel, there's a point in John 9 where there's a blind man. And the disciples are like, well, you know, Jesus, is it his fault? His parents' fault? Why is he blind? Whose fault is it? And Jesus says, this man was born blind so he can give glory to God. A few chapters later in John 11, Jesus is working with Lazarus' family while Lazarus is still in the tomb. And they're beside themselves, devastated. And Jesus says, yeah, this has happened so that God can get glory. I want to make you a promise, not because I can make these promises, but because the Bible makes these promises. If you're in a down season, it may not be fair. It may not be right. You may not deserve it. But if you commit, I'm clinging on to God, he can bring something glorious out of this. That doesn't mean that years from now, when God is being glorified because of your tragedy, because of your trial, it doesn't mean you will look back on that season and ever say, I'm glad that happened. But it does mean you can look back and say, at least it was for something. I didn't walk through that hell and fire and crap for nothing. Instead, God used it for something.